Christopher Columbus was not the first to discover the Caribbean islands. More than 1,000 years before the landing of the Europeans, Cuba and the other islands of the Greater Caribbean were already inhabited by the Taino Indians. The Tainos were a peaceful and prosperous people practicing intensive agriculture. The first contacts were warm, but the situation was soon to deteriorate for the Tainos. Ill treatment on the part of the colonists, exactions and massacres, as well as diseases imported from Europe, contributed to make their civilization disappear in a few years. Hatchui was one of the first Indian chiefs to oppose the invaders by force. He perished at the stake in 1512. He was the first hero of the fight against colonization. Cuba has several statues dedicated to this resistance fighter, among others in Baracoa. The colonizers looked for profit above all, without worrying about the consequences on the indigenous populations. The search for gold was their greatest motivation. They first dispossessed the local populations, before putting the inhabitants to work to extract the gold from the mines. Some realized that it was easier to attack ships belonging to competing colonial powers. Thus, the Dutch Piet Hein became a very popular hero after having plundered the Spanish fleet in the Bay of Matanzas in 1628. The booty made it possible to pay all the expenses of the Army of the Netherlands during 8 months. The Spanish-American War in 1898 ended with the independence of Cuba in 1901. Obviously, the independence of Cuba vis-a-vis Spain has its price. The whole region came under the control of the United States. Cuba was of strategic interest to Americans who saw Cuba as an excellent location for military bases. Cuba, geographically close to the United States, gradually turned into a paradise for rich Americans. The living conditions of the locals did not improve, and the political situation in Cuba gradually led to the dictatorship led by Fulgencio Batista. And soon the streets were filled with gleaming Chevrolets and other Oldsmobiles. The Americans established on the island were not all great capitalists. Among them, the writer Ernest Hemmingway occupies a prominent place. Hemingway was a big fan of fishing and hunting. Here are some pictures of his boat, the Pilar, as well as of the interior of his villa in Havana, bought in 1939. Thanks to cinema adaptation rights for his novel For Whom the Bell Tolls. Rare are those who have their statue in their usual place in their favorite bar. Batista's regime was based on corruption and enjoyed the support of the American mafia, which held a monopoly on gambling, prostitution, and drugs. Very profitable activities. Anger had been brewing since 1951, and an attack by 100 guerrillas on the Moncada barracks in Santiago on July 26, 1953, marked the beginning of the Cuban Revolution. The attack on the barracks ended in failure and the death of dozens of guerrillas. The leaders of the rebellion, including the brothers Fidel and Raúl Castro, among others, had to go into exile, but returned to Cuba a few years later. Under the pressure of the revolution led by Fidel Castro, aided by Ernesto Che Guevara, President Batista resigned January 1, 1959. Relations with the United States would soon deteriorate, and the failed landing in the Bay of Pigs in 1961, followed by the Soviet missile affair the following year, marked the start of a severe embargo that was to last 60 years. With all the economic and political consequences due to forced isolation. Among other consequences, the non-renewal of the car fleet, which makes tourists happy. An attempt at reconciliation with the turbulent history of this country? In the 1960s, a huge fresco representing the evolution of the land from its origins to the present day was painted on a cliff in Vinales.